There's a new sheriff in town, and that sheriff name is NIL. NIL, or name, image, and likeness, is the talk of the town, and we're gearing up for the next collegiate football season. High school athletes are committing and decommitting to and from top universities for scholarships and NIL deal potential. This has opened a new door to collegiate sports that was once a loud whisper, and the door is pay for play. The history of pay for play extends to the first football program where locals and college students were allowed to play. Of course, this was prior to the National Collegiate Athletic Association, or NCAA, was formed to regulate college sports. The NCAA evolved out of the need for player protection, but further evolved into protection of interest on both sides, which may times seem to favor the NCAA over the athletes. What the NCAA defined as an amateur player was a person who did not get paid. Plain and simple, to be considered a college athlete, you must not get paid. Court rulings held this standard as players challenged this within the last 25 years. Oh, but times have changed. And the attitude on what an amateur has changed as well. It was hard to maintain this stance as the number from ticket sales, jersey sales, television deals were reported over the years. Millions of dollars are generated on the backs of college players who are amateurs, but also so entertaining that they draw upwards of 100,000 people per game. The money generated the feeling of being controlled by the NCAA, and no one speaking on the players' behalf have led us to where we are today. Players, as of 2021, are allowed to generate income outside of scholarship and stipend from the use of their name, image, and likeness. This means that they can be paid for commercial advertisements, online ads, social media mentions, signed paraphernalia, and walking advertisements. NIL deals have reshaped recruiting, players, fans, coaches, and even politics in the first year of inception, positively and negatively. NIL is wide open and yet to be regulated, as the powers that be do not yet know how to regulate it. But NIL must be regulated to prevent the collapse of college football as we currently know it today. Name, image, and likeness benefits, as we know, thus far are not regulated on a grand scale. The California court ruling in favor of allowing these benefits in 2020 started a trend across many states that now allow these benefits. Some states, however, do not allow benefits or have no legislation to prohibit this. Due to lack of regulation and lack of uniform rules, NIL is in a sort of no man's land and is being implemented at will. The NCAA has only approved the allowance of benefits, but has essentially washed their hands of managing it. This is expected, as they may have felt forced into approving the benefits in the first place. The immediate variables that have been discussed in the 1 year that the NIL benefits have been on the table include the following: tax liability, sexism, racism, improper recruiting practices, and positive negative psychological effects on collegiate athletes. The tax implications of NIL benefits could be significant or nil depending on the amount a player is receiving. According to Messina M and Messina F, anything over $12,550 will have to be reported as self-employment income to the federal government. This self-employment status also carries a self-employment tax liability. Messina M and Messina F concerns themselves with students' ignorance of the law, as they state most athletes have spent their whole lives weekly and yearly mastering the sport, and more than likely not as much holding jobs. They go on to mention that the NIL payments can affect need-based grants such as the Pell Grant Award, Parent of Athletes Filing Status, since their dependent may be earning substantial income and potential tax penalties. Messina and Messina state that to properly serve college athletes, the NCAA member institutions need to provide education on the new NIL rules. This education would include tax liability and money management, but ultimately, a representation who is well versed in the seemingly adult task would be ideal. Recruiting practices and recruiting behavior have been affected within the last year since NIL has been implemented, Hack reports. The Atlantic Coast Conference, one of collegiate athletes' so-called Power 5 conferences, have called upon Congress to enact nationwide NIL restrictions. The ACC's reasoning, some states grant college athletes greater freedom with regard to NIL deals than others do. So schools and states with fewer restrictions arguably have a recruiting advantage. This was in response to all-star wide receiver and cornerback and the nation's #1 recruited football player decommitment from Florida State University and subsequent committed to Jackson State University, a historically black university in Jackson, Mississippi. This may also tie into the racial implications of NIL. This was a major loss to the program to a school that historically has never been considered a recruiting threat to any Power 5 conference schools. So advertisers have been accused of giving lucrative NIL deals to lower tier players based on their sex appeal and not their athletic ability. Hack quotes South Carolina women's basketball star Leah Boston, who is black and led her team to the NCAA title in April, has one NIL deal from a fried chicken chain, Bojangles, whereas the most sought-after endorsers look a certain way, hot, blonde, and white. Though no one can tell an advertiser who to offer a deal to, this may prevent psychological impact on players. Walsh summarized a Yale School of Management study done on money and how it affects one's self-sufficiency, and was found that when money was not considered an issue, a person was likely to be goal-oriented and did not desire help or direction from others. The psychological reaction to money could be catastrophic to both athletic teams and players. Advertisers who are choosing NIL recipients based on their social media presence following nano-marketing. Nano-marketing is a term that entails offering deals with individuals who have small social media presence of less than 10,000 followers. Studies have found that although these types of influencers do not have large audience, the audience that they do have find themselves more trustworthy, thus creating better engagement and likeness for the ad to be successful. These issues with NIL are just a few on the surface and have been noticed. Who knows the deeper implications NIL will have on college programs and participants? The history of college athletes and its money rendering status makes NIL seem like open sesame for unsavory deals and dealings. Just recently, Sports Illustrated magazine reported that schools have NIL funds and fundraisers. One school, which I won't name, has raised over $10 million in NIL funds in 1 month. This is a crazy number to consider, that this money will increase recruitment and put the dollars into accounts of teenagers. NIL is new, exciting, and uncharted territory with major implications for the future of college athletes. The new sheriff has turned the town upside down, and there is no regulation in sight. The NCAA has released any new guidance on NIL, and there is no federal legislation on the books. The current issues that are faced are just themes to study at this point and to see how it progresses. The evolution of the mass monetization of college sports needed to be exposed, and money benefit is needed, but regulation is a must.